Hello, and I wanted to start by talking about this article which I found on Spike. It's funny how things all turn up at the same time, doesn't it? I had an interview with somebody a couple of days ago, or 3 days ago, in which I voiced some concern about the concentration on the white race as a sort of political concept. I'm not entirely sure what sort of a concept it is, actually. But, well, I'll tell you why I feel it's wrong to talk about it. And one of the first reasons, well, it's not wrong to talk about it, but wrong to make it a sort of political starting point. You see, recently black people have been talking about being black, speaking as a black person, that sort of thing. And they've been using that as a weapon. If they're black, you can't contradict them because you're not black. And this all started, it seems to me, when Muslim apologists started muddying the waters by deliberately conflating Islam, or the followers of Islam, with a race. Now, we all know that Muslims are not necessarily of any particular skin hue. There are Muslims in China, there are Muslims in Africa, there are Muslims in Italy, there are Muslims in Britain, there are Muslims in Scandinavia. And they're of all different hues and colours, and frequently don't like each other as well, the various sects, so they're not even united in most cases. But people have got the idea that when you say the word Muslim, you're referring to, in the UK, you're referring to people, generally speaking, of Pakistani origin, and so the two things are sort of squashed themselves together. It's not true, of course. And people are confusing or conflating that with the problems of assimilation, cultural assimilation, which are completely different. Some years ago, I was driving to Luton, and I took a turn off too early, and I found myself in a town centre, not Luton, a town centre that might as well have been in Karachi. I'm not kidding you, I was shocked. Not shocked by the fact that the people were there conducting their ordinary lives. They're every bit entitled to do that. No, I was shocked by the way they were dressed. The men were wearing dashers and the women were shrouded in draperies, some of them fully veiled, and some of them maybe with their faces showing and their hands, and that was about it. And all I could see over the skyline were various minarets. And I thought, this is not what England is. I'm in England at the time, but it's not what Britain is either. So that was shocking. But that has nothing to do with the skin colour of these people. That has to do with their cultural takeover of that particular city centre. It's not what you expect in England. And that is a problem. And the problem is this: their parents and grandparents came to this country and they kept their religion, but in general, they integrated, not assimilated, they integrated into the community. They wore Western clothes, they didn't wholesale take over city centres in that sort of way, and they kept themselves, and as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. The big problem now is satellite television. Because now there's a whole generation of people who just watch Pakistani television programmes, or maybe Saudi television programmes. There are people there who wouldn't speak a word of English. There are people there who would stay in their neighbourhoods, never getting out, never talking to the people around them, living their own Pakistani lives, completely out of the English system. But that is not a skin colour problem. That's a culture problem. And when you start talking about skin colour, you're muddying the water, because you can't have a clear discussion about skin colour. There is no way. Let's assume, well, okay, let's say this. Why discuss skin colour? What's the point? And I'm asking that because if you are somebody who wants to define skin colour, define people according to skin colour, but you're not enshrining that in any sort of a legal system, it will not make any difference as to the sort of education you get, or the sort of medical attention you get, or where you're allowed to go. In other words, that it doesn't make any difference at all, then what's the point of discussing it? You would only want to discuss skin colour if you are going to, in some way, make it advantageous to be one skin colour or another. So when you start talking about skin colour, you are playing into the black supremacist narrative. And that's why I think it's dangerous. And it's not simple. Let's face it. What happens? You're talking about skin colour. You're talking about the lessening of the white race, the fact that the numbers are going down in relation to browner people. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to make it illegal for white people to marry black people or brown people? What can you do? It's true. One of the problems that Britain has had is, and I've seen it in areas where such immigrants have been settled, there are too many people from entirely different cultures being settled all in lumps, generally speaking, just dumped in council estates. There's all sorts of trouble from that. And they haven't been assimilated integrated into the culture, and there are social problems. That should not have happened. I want to say that a lot of the people who were criticising me for the doubts I was raising 2 videos ago are exactly the sort of people who would have been voting Labour. It was the Labour Party that did all of this. The Conservatives didn't want to stop. There was a time when the Conservatives were terribly racist, and then they learnt their lesson. Then they wanted controlled immigration, and they were doing that, and that's fine. You let people in, doesn't matter what they are, so long as they're going to contribute to the society and help to build our country. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. What there is something wrong with is taking in huge amounts of people who don't care about this country. Couldn't care less. They just want the benefit system, and there are many of those. And then there are some genuine refugees, who you do have to take care of, that's for sure. But we know that a lot of the migrants here are not genuine refugees, they're economic migrants. And that was a Labour Party policy. The Labour Party were talking in private about rubbing people's noses in diversity. We all know that, but it's done now. If you voted Labour in the past 20 years, you are responsible for the problems we have now. But they are our problems now, and we have to fix them. Now, the fixing is going to be complicated. You can't just wish problems out of existence. You can't order them out of existence. You can't say, for instance, talking about teachers who are being propagandizing for Brexit or whatever. You can't say you'll just make an example of them. It doesn't work. I'd like it to work, but it doesn't. I mean, if you look at Muslim society, for instance, there's lots of thievery going on in Muslim society, even in those places where a Muslim apologist will say, if we have Sharia law in this country, then all we'd have to do is cut off a couple of hands. It's going to make an example of them. All stealing is going to stop. Does anyone honestly think that Muslim societies are the most law-abiding in the world? No, they're not. All you've got to do, in fact, I'll try and find a picture just to show you. If you go into any shopping area in any part of the Muslim world, you'll find every single shop has steel shutters on it. They don't have steel shutters on the shops in my local shopping centre. That's because there's less thievery in my local shopping centre than there is in most shopping centres in most Arab countries. I'll try it. Hang on, I'll make a note of that. Look for a shutters. Making an example of people doesn't help when they don't have the will to act properly. Now, well, that's that set of notes. I am not over-intellectualising this. You see, that's been a historical problem. You find a lot of governments coming into power with simple solutions. Look, this is a bad situation. Everyone agrees it's a bad situation. We have the answer. That is the cry of any Islamist. The answer is Sharia law. That's it. It'll stop everything and it'll be a perfect world. It's what the communists said. Yes, we'll stop people from having property. There'll be no more stealing. There'll be no more fights. Yeah, we're all communists. There'll be no more wars. That's, all simple and lovely. But it doesn't work like that, does it? That's the problem. Now, I do not give solutions. I am here making these videos to point out what I see as the problems. You are very welcome to make your comments underneath to tell me how you see the solutions or whether you think I'm seeing a problem that doesn't exist. Or I'm ignoring a problem that does. But the problems with our society now are cultural. However, it's easier for people like Joe Swinson, and I'll have to make a copy of this page here. Joe Swinson made a jibe about Boris Johnson being a white man. Lib Dem leader Joe Swinson last week described Boris Johnson, Jeremy Corbyn and their aides' attempts to thrash out a new withdrawal agreement as 6 white men stuck in the past conspiring to wreck our future. Now, this woman is a totalitarian. She has a simple answer to everything. Dump what people are saying, rejoin the EU, or, don't leave it or whatever. That will solve all our problems in this country. It's another one of those simplistic things. And then let's undermine these men. Call them old white men or white men stuck in the past. That's a nice jibe. This woman's a dangerous woman. But she's only one side of the coin. She's making use of this white jibe to gain traction. And there are white people making use of this white pride to gain traction as well. But what are they actually doing for white people besides giving them a sense of grievance? Grievance gets you nowhere. It's not creative. It's only destructive. And let's face it, white people are damaging themselves as well. Where are your children? If you're so proud of the white race, why aren't you having more? I think in Germany it's down to 1.3 kids per family. No. There's a problem here, isn't there? And this is a last resort, talking about whiteness. There are other things to talk about. We have a culture, I'll get onto that in a minute. The Europeans, let's look at it this way. The Chinese are more intelligent than the Europeans, and yet they didn't invent the steam engine. And that's a cultural thing. The Chinese culture, it was so framed that it wasn't worth inventing a steam engine. There's so many human resources, so much in the way of human resources in China. It just wasn't it didn't factor in. But of the European civilizations, we've got this. First of all, Catholic Europe didn't invent the steam engine either. It was only Protestant Europe that did that, because the Protestants have a sort of self-reliant attitude that caused them to be more inventive. Now other countries are inventing other things, but the kickstart was people in Protestant Europe. That's a cultural thing. And when you say, oh, you're proud of being white, you get people who say they're proud of being white, and they don't know a single thing about their own culture. How many of the people who talk about proud of being white are proud of Chaucer or Shakespeare or Johnson or Thackeray or Virginia Woolf? I don't like Virginia Woolf, by the way, but no doubt about it, she could wield a pen. What is the thing about being white that's to be proud of? When I was a kid, I was taught you shouldn't make fun of people for what they can't change. You don't make fun of their names. You don't make fun of any physical disability they have. At that time, nobody was talking about skin colour much, but that was also taken for granted. It's considered the height of bad manners to make jokes about people's names at that time. It's still a bit embarrassing now, although it's going because other countries do it all the time. So if you're not supposed to make fun of people for having a club foot or one eye missing or whatever, then why should you praise them for being of a certain skin colour? That is no achievement. You are as you are. You were born as you were born. It's not an achievement. What is an achievement is knowing about your culture and being proud of that, out of the tradition from which you came. Trying to categorise people by their skin colour, well, it's too late now. You might have been able to do that 100 years ago. You can't do it now. The world has moved on. People have moved around too much. We have what we have, and we have to deal with that. And what we have to deal with is cultural fragmentation. And we shouldn't get sidetracked into skin colour, because that's actually a dead end. We have to keep our European culture. We have to know about it. What do they say? A tree that has deep roots doesn't get blown over in a gale. We've got roots that go for miles. But the sort of roots that a lot of people who are so proud of being white, the sort of roots they have are like that big. because they don't know anything more than, I don't know what, the Kardashians. And I'm not saying all of the people watching this who were criticising me last week were like that, but you know, a lot of them were. I could tell that from the way they were writing. Now, being proud of your culture requires work, and that's the problem. You have to work at it. You have to read. You have to know. You have to study history. Proper history, not conspiracy theories. Read a lot of books. Know your culture. Transmit your culture to your children and have children. If you really want to be proud of your race, talk about the things that your race has done. Chasing a skin colour gets you nowhere. But chasing your culture gives you depth, gives you roots, and requires work. And that's it. If you want to donate or contact, the information will be rolling over the Graniopteryx as I speak. Please like, subscribe and share because it does help with the algorithm. If you visit my channel on YouTube and one day discover that I've disappeared without warning, you'll still find me on BitChute or Minds. Just go to either of those platforms and do a search for Graniopteryx. If you're already watching this on BitChute or Minds, good for you. Meanwhile, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember that you must keep checking the subscribe and bell icons because occasionally they reset. Till next time.